What's good, Raptor fans? Hopefully, we figured out the lag, but if we haven't, we'll certainly figure it out tomorrow. What are the Toronto Raptors doing? Are they tanking? Is this a team that is tanking? Is this a team that doesn't have a viable backup point guard who can make an open jump shot? Is this a team that did not use their mid level exception? Is this a team that is currently 7 and 17 and has beat two teams that are above 500 now? Is this a team that has one of the hardest strength of schedules that I've ever seen in my life? And it seems like every single time we refresh the strength of schedule, it seems to get harder. And I don't understand how that keeps happening. So I decided to do something pretty cool. I did the math per my estimates on what the Toronto Raptors record will be at the trade deadline when they inevitably have to make the big roster decisions, decide to shut things down, trade away vets, all that stuff. Why has Bruce Brown not been playing? Why has Kelly Olynyk been so slow to the mend? Why are they milking this Emmanuel Quickley thing? If they are milking the Emmanuel Quickley thing, we don't know that. I mean, the Raptors are actually pretty secretive about this stuff. So I decided to do the math, and hopefully, when I pull this screen on, I'm not going to get super laggy when I do it. But hey, I'm not laggy. Success. Okay. All right. Let's break this down. Okay. So far the Toronto Raptors are 7 and 17 after last night's loss, or just a few hours ago, their loss to the Dallas Mavericks. These are the teams they've beaten. The 12 and 10 Minnesota Timberwolves. Not bad. Not bad at all. It was a pretty competitive win. Okay. They beat the 11 and 10 Miami Heat. They're going to see the Miami Heat again very soon. They beat the 11 and 13 Sacramento Kings, the 10 and 14 Indiana Pacers twice, the 6 and 15 Philadelphia 76ers, and the 5 and 19 New Orleans Pelicans, who were decimated by injuries at that point. They are currently 1 and 11 away from the Scotiabank Arena, with their only road win coming against the lowly Pelicans team that I mentioned, and they are 6 and 6 at home. So let's do some fast math here, and I'm just going to ask you to take some leaps of faith with me, and let's assume that at home, the Toronto Raptors will beat contenders 5% of the time. That's 1 out of 20 against teams like Boston, Cleveland. Who are the contenders? OKC, basically, those teams. They'll beat fringe contenders 20% of the time. They'll beat around 500 teams at home about 60% of the time. Did I say fringe contenders 60%? Fringe contenders 20% of the time. They'll beat play-in bounders, which is teams like themselves, teams like Detroit, teams like Brooklyn, 75% of the time at home. And they'll beat the absolute bottom feeders, because nobody wins 100% of the time, like the Washingtons and the Utahs, 85% of the time. So let's assume on the road, where the Raptors are notoriously worse, and they will probably continue to be worse because the same people that have been worse so far are pretty much going to be on your team later. I mean, you can assume that Emmanuel Quickley being a slightly older player, Bruce Brown being a slightly older player, Kelly Olynyk being a slightly older player, maybe these players, Scottie Barnes being a pretty good road player, all these players will probably help to balance you out on the road. But, players like RJ Barrett have notoriously been worse on the road. There's a lot of young players on this team. There's a lot of role player types, probably going to still struggle a little bit on the road. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that they're going to win 5% of road teams against contenders. So same amount as, at home. It's just barely a shot in the dark at 1 and 20. 15% of road games against fringe contenders, 20% of road games against around 500 teams. They'll win 35% of road games against play-in teams and 60% of road games against bottom feeders like the New Orleans Pelicans and the Washington Wizards. Okay. Now, I do think that it's worth noting that the Washington Wizards just beat the Denver Nuggets at home today, so that's worth noting. It's also worth noting that my Rogers laggy ass internet at 3:50 a.m. is on 1 bar right now. Why does it do this? Anyways, okay, so here are the next games. These are all the games going right up till the trade deadline. Okay, so in brackets, I have carefully added what the win percentage is as a sum fraction of a win. So Miami gives you a 0.2 win. Chicago gives you a 0.75 win. Brooklyn gives you a 0.75 win. Sum total, that's almost 2 wins against those 3 teams, right? You might end up beating the Miami. You might end up losing to Chicago. You beat Brooklyn. There's your 2 wins, right? Houston, point 2. You get it. I've laid it all out. You can definitely stop this video out later. I don't want to read out all of this, but basically, your schedule is as follows. This includes the 2 games that were added to the schedule in the in-season tournament. You are facing New York on Monday. Then you have Miami, Chicago, and Brooklyn with about a 10-day span. So a lot of rest between those 4 games. Then you have Houston. Then you're on the road at New York, at Memphis, Atlanta, at Boston, Brooklyn, Orlando, Milwaukee, at New York, at Cleveland, at Detroit, Golden State Warriors, Boston, at Milwaukee, Orlando, at Atlanta. Then you got the New Orleans Pelicans. Who knows what their health situation will be like at that point, whether they'll have shut it down completely, traded Zion Williamson, traded Brandon Ingram. We don't know. We don't know what the context of that team is going to be. We do know the context of the Washington Wizards is still going to be pretty bad, though. So you're at Washington. That should be a win. Chicago, LA Clippers, New York, Memphis. Okay. So by my math, very rough here. The Raptors are very generously expected to go 10-17 over the next 27, which would put them at their current mark of 7-17. They'd be 17-34 at the trade deadline. Now, this is music to your ears if you are one of those tank world order, people, because while I'll agree that Emmanuel Quickley and Bruce Brown might change the calculus a little bit here, and maybe a trade could as well, if the Raptors decide to swing for a trade, which I don't see any evidence to suggest that they would do that at this point. So could a big jump from a young player like, I don't know, Jonathan Mobo has been great. What if he can be greater? Jacoby Walter has struggled. What if he turns it around magically, like Grady turned it around? With his defense, could he be like the missing piece to the bench? We don't know. Olynyk over Boucher is already solving a lot of problems for me just based on what I saw, but we don't know if Kelly Olynyk is going to stay healthy. Back injuries are a bitch. We don't know if Bruce Brown is going to stay healthy. We don't know if Emmanuel Quickley is going to have another injury. We definitely don't know if Scottie Barnes is going to have another injury. Touch wood, hope he doesn't. But all these things are factored in. Injuries are a part of sports. The Raptors do not have the depth to sustain any injury to any of their guards. So after the trade deadline, I think it's worth noting that the next 11 games, they could very conceivably go 4-7 because that stretch is brutal. It's OKC at OKC. So on the road at OKC, at Houston, at Philly, Cleveland, Miami, Phoenix, Boston, at Indiana, at Chicago, at Orlando. And at that point, Orlando should have Paolo Banchero back. And given how far it is into the season, they should probably have Franz back as well. And they will probably be looking to make up for some lost time in terms of just gelling their unit together. They do have a pretty deep team, and they're a pretty good team. And we'll see if KCP ends up bouncing it around. So this will put them around 21-41 with the easiest part of their schedule ahead. The genius of this, of course, is the Raptors have a pretty damn easy schedule the rest of the way through. But it doesn't matter if you have an easy schedule the rest of the way through. I can't say the Raptors' schedule last April was all that difficult. They ended up losing a ton of games anyway because they were playing crazy lineups and they were starting Malik Williams at center. This is a team that has shown a brilliant ability to throw a season late. They don't throw it early, though. That's the thing that you need to consider. They'll never throw it early, but they'll throw it late. Now let's take this off. Hopefully the Wi-Fi clears up a little bit. Okay, so let's try to understand this. I've mentioned this before, but I think that the data now is showing you a clearer picture. Sure, you could become a better class of team. But at some point during this year, to make up for the fact that you are currently 7-17, just like the Milwaukee Bucks had to make up for a lot, just like the Philadelphia 76ers, if they want to save their season, they're going to have to make up for a lot. At some point, no matter how bad the East is, at some point, you're not going to be able to sell yourself on a 17-34 team. The math of it just looks way too bad. Now, the blessing in disguise for the Toronto Raptors to a lot of people who are cribbing about that early schedule of like, oh my God, the schedule gods hate the Raptors. The NBA hates the Raptors. No. The NBA did the Raptors the biggest favor on the planet because had you gotten your April schedule, your March, April schedule in October, November, and had you been even halfway expected to be healthy, I think there's a chance that you enter the trade deadline like with 23-24 wins, at which point you're buying at the trade deadline, at which point you get reinforcements, at which point you use a mid level, at which point you trade maybe a first round pick again, the Jakob Pertl scenario. Oh my God, MLSC, you know, bumping at the coffers. I wouldn't be surprised if Masai Ujiri literally put an email to Adam Silver saying, "Give me what you got. Give me what you got. Give me the worst schedule in the history of the world for November, December, January, February, so I can sell the fan base on a tank." And that's very conspiratorial of me to say. That's not very sane of me to say. I don't think Masai Ujiri has that kind of pull, but maybe he does. My point is, this is the type of thing that you will look back on years from now and say, what a blessing in disguise that was. Because again, the whole thing comes down to optics. You cannot, under any realistic circumstance, without a significant amount of backlash, especially with a media space that is this dying. These people are so, I tell you, they have no vision. They have no vision for the future. All they want, all these people want is hits on ads, hits on articles, hits on on their gambling sponsorships. They would never, ever let the Raptors throw a season when the Raptors were close to 500. Even if the schedule at the end of the season was abysmal and they had OKC, at Houston, at Memphis to end the season, they would never let it go unchallenged that the Raptors tanked the season when they had a chance to make the play-in. However, when you're like 20 and 40, you don't have to sell anyone on anything because everyone already writes you off because the math is obvious. But if you actually do have some time, definitely go look at what the Raptors are facing in March and April. It's one of the easiest schedules in the league. I think around March 1st, if I wouldn't be mistaken, the Raptors have like the easiest strength of schedule in the league. So at that point, you face Washington 3 times in a month, you face Portland, you face these like really bad teams. And I know what you're thinking, Rob. The Raptors are fully capable of losing to some bad teams. I hear you. The Raptors are capable of losing to some bad teams. I don't think they're capable of losing to the Washington Wizards in March. That I don't think so. So at some point, if Emmanuel quickly comes back and the Raptors stage like a 10-2, you need a 10-2. You need a 10-2 or a 10-3, like a 15-5, that type of run to save your season. Point blank center. You need that type of run. And if you're not going to get that type of run, at some point, you're definitely going to have to pull the plug on this season. And that plug will be pulled at the trade deadline. So again, at the trade deadline with OKC and at Houston and at Philly and Cleveland, Miami, Phoenix, Boston as your next 7 after the trade deadline, you could very realistically, if my math is right, be roughly a 17-34 team with 7 really hard games in a row. I mean, I have no idea at Philly is going to be hard or easy at that point. We don't know if Joel Embiid is back. We don't know how they're playing. You don't know if they're tanking. But let's just assume that OKC, Houston, Cleveland, Phoenix, and Boston are still going to be really hard games. And then, of course, you have games like Indiana, Orlando, Chicago, all play-in teams, all fringy playoff teams, and we don't know where their season's going to be either at that point. At some point, you really are like, if you start looking at this, man, you get the New York, Miami. Okay, let's say you go over there. Those are your next 2. Okay, so now you're 7-19. The math starts to look very appetizing for a teardown, right? If you lose even one of Brooklyn or Chicago winnable games here with Houston looking up, like suddenly you're like potentially 8-20, 8-21. You start to get really ugly with the record. And again, the optics are everything here. So if the optics start to look like, okay, this team is cooked, you get one more injury, maybe RJ Barrett or something, it's just like, okay, it's hopeless now. Pull the plug. Now you tank. Okay. The good thing about the tank is I'll tell you 2 really good things about it. Well, 3, I'll tell you really 3 things about the tank, and then we'll get out of here. And if this video is at all laggy when I watch it back, I'm just going to unpost it and then repost it as a video clipped up and cleaned up because I'm sick and tired of this laggy internet stuff. So the first good thing, which I think is worth mentioning, I'll make this like this small and get this out of here. The first good thing is naturally that the Toronto Raptors are elite at identifying talent in the draft. So regardless of how the lottery balls do bounce, there will be some to bounce if the Raptors go the way I think they're going to go. And at that point, you'll be able to identify a really elite talent and then bring them onto the team. And you clearly need some talent. You need a talent upgrade, at least at the center, maybe at the backup point guard spot. It's a really good draft for the Raptors because almost every single player in this draft really fits what the Raptors are trying to do. So that's really an important part. So that's the first good thing. The second good thing is, unlike last year, where you were playing the Jamias Ramseys, the Javon Freeman Liberties, the Mohamedou Gays, Jonte Porter was pretty good, but I mean, still, Jonte Porter, Jonathan Mobo, there's a gap here. You were playing the Malik Williams. You were playing really just fringe, hopeful NBA players, and it made for some very ugly basketball. Now, those were slightly older players. They were like 24, 25, 26. How about playing a whole bunch of 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds a lot of minutes? How about playing Davion Mitchell as your starting point guard with Jacoby Walter as your shooting guard and Jamison Battle as your small forward, maybe Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett rotating as the power forward in that lineup. And then you have Jonathan Mobo over Chomshay. Like, this is such a fun team to watch. Even if they get smoked by 20 to 30 points, it's going to be great for development. And, you've already taken care of all your main guys. So there's no like contract issues hinging. The only contract issues hinging are like guys like Bruce Brown, Chris Boucher, Davion Mitchell. And those guys, no offense, are not exactly tipping the balances of wins and losses. The guys who tip the balance of wins and losses are Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes, Jakob Pertl, Kelly Olynyk. Contract, all those guys are under contract for next year. So there's no issue here. There's no Fred VanVleet. There's no Pascal Siakam. There's no Anunoby. We're like, oh my God, how could you ask this person to, tank their value in a contract year? The Raptors don't have to do anything unethical about that. So that's the second good thing. So you'll actually get to watch some young players and there's no conflicting contract issues. The only contract issue that you could even think of is Scottie Barnes' potential All NBA bid, which I'm sure at some point, if the Raptors end up being 20 and 40, you could just tell them, like, it's not happening, bro. There's no chance in hell anyone's voting for a player who's on a bottom 6 team to be All NBA. I don't think it's ever happened. I don't think it's ever going to happen. Okay. So you don't have Scottie Barnes, and he's not like a greedy money guy. He's not necessarily contract over team guy. He'll understand at that point. He's not going to try to cost you Cooper Flag to chase some like 0.1% chance at All NBA. So I think that that's the second good thing. The third good thing, which I think is also very, very important, is something that I have forgotten. And clearly I'm trying to ad lib my way or, try to like, God damn it. Okay. What was the first thing? This is why you don't do lives at 4 a.m. Okay. The first thing was, watchable, good scouting. The third thing. Yes. The third thing. The third thing is your cap flexibility going into next year. Yes. Okay. So you actually have a pretty favorable cap situation. You have a bunch of expirings, and you would be basically integrating this young player. And then from next year onward, there's no more tanking. So you use the entire year to develop. You have this excellent development staff. You get all these reps for your young players right at the end, right? And then you have all these expirings potentially that you can move off or park your cap space, etc. And you take all that cap flexibility plus that high-end draft pick, which will be, doubled because you have the Portland second round pick as well. You take these two young players, which are two very cheap assets coming onto your team relative to what they'll be worth. And then now you can start making roster moves. Now, if you're really, really happy with your young core, provided this lottery pick is like a top 6, top 7 guy, you get a Kaman Malawach, you get, maybe an Ace Bailey. I don't know who you get at that point. Yegor Demon, Dylan Harper. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of directions you can go. Yakuchonis has been really, really good. So you take that player, add that to this core, and now you've got this nucleus where you can say, okay, we're ready to build with this. This is what we're going forward with. Now, Ulrich is a year older. We don't know if he'll be a rotation player next year. Jonathan Mobo is making crazy leaps. So all these young players are getting better this year, and it's all building up to what I think is going to be a massive surprise at some point. Like the Raptors are going to come, man. They're going to come and they're going to blow some people away. Point Scotty was awesome tonight. If you haven't checked it out on X/Twitter, check it out. Kyrie Irving had some brilliant things to say about Scottie Barnes. In fact, I'll play it for y'all actually because we're right here. Where the hell are we here? Doo, doo, doo. Here we go. So that was cool. And it's great to see Kyrie, Magic, Kyle Lowry, Jason Kidd all acknowledge Scotty as a point guard. It's really great. Uh-oh. The volume was low on our end. Oh, I'm sorry. You might have to raise it up a little bit. It was a little bit lower. I apologize. Anyways, long story short, I think the Raptors are in a great place. I do think that had they been healthy, this might have gone a different way. I think that they would have been a play-in team. I think at this point, instead of 7-17, maybe you're 10-14. And 10 and 14 is a really different equation, right? So I think like if you look at it from that perspective and you say, okay, you take in the schedule, you take in all the development, you have all these young players, you have this parked cap space, you have financial flexibility going forward, you have young players who are getting way better, you have a budding superstar who I think is really taking a step in terms of his on-ball creation and his ability to sort of manipulate the game. I don't think Scottie Barnes being a top 15 player perennially jump is that far away. I think it's coming. I think it could already be here like within a couple of weeks. And at that point, you know, what do you add to it? Now, most importantly, what do you subtract from it? Because right now the Raptors are losing games in spite of themselves, right? When you start playing Davion Mitchell 27 minutes, when you start playing Chris Boucher through some abysmal stretches, when you start resting guys and start milking out these injuries super long term, what are you really doing? When you go into the season without a single competent backup point guard, when you go into the season with multiple defensive liabilities in your starting lineup, in your core starting lineup, and those are guys who have to pretty much play a large chunk of minutes just to sustain your offense. When you go into a season with a sub-optimized spacing of Jakob Poeltl plus Scottie Barnes and Davion Mitchell playing so many minutes together, when you do that, you are pretty much telling me that you are not serious. When your messaging coming out is this is the first year of a rebuild, when your messaging through Jakob Poeltl, who is clearly aware of what you're doing, is we're not necessarily going to go out and try to win every single game. I think this is very clear. Now, if you as fans want to believe that the Toronto Raptors are trying to win games, you are right. They are trying to win games. However, there's one thing of the guys on the court try to win the game. There's another thing where the guys in the ivory towers with the suits and the $1 million contracts, they put together a roster that can actually win basketball games. And the coach who's coaching the game is actually coaching to win. There have been about 3 games this year where I can definitively tell you that Darko Rajakovic coached to win. And one of those games was against Boston. And we saw how that ended. That ended on like basically a buzzer beating 3 from Jason Tatum. Expect a lot of games like that where the Raptors will go into OKC and they'll try to win that game. There will be like 10, 12 games this year that'll be like litmus test games. I'm really praying that they pull the plug long before they get to March and April. The only way that I will be convinced to move away from this thought process is if you look at the upcoming schedule, if they start beating teams like New York consistently, Cleveland, if they beat teams like this, if they had beat Dallas, OKC, if they had been competitive against OKC and they'd beaten Dallas, I think I might feel a little bit differently about this, right? At some point, as the home team, you have to be able to beat these teams. Now, to anyone out there who doesn't watch the NBA, the OKC Thunder have lost games this year. Go check out who they've lost games to. It's perfectly possible for them to lose games to lower seeded competition. They're not a perfect basketball team. They look like a perfect basketball team against the Raptors, but they're not a perfect basketball team. The Raptors are far, far, far from a perfect basketball team. So clearly, you can't have embarrassing performances like that against OKC and then try to think that you're going to go beat Cleveland or you're going to be competitive in a first round series. Again, past behavior is a great predictor of future behavior. The Raptors tanked in Tampa. There was a huge prize on the line. They believed in Scottie. They believed in Evan Mobley. They probably believed in Cade Cunningham as well. And they probably believed in guys like Jonathan Kuminga if those guys were not there. So they believed in that draft. This is a team that has shown an ability to pivot when they believe that the prize is worth it. And I believe that the 2025 draft presents more value, at least comparatively, to the 2021 draft that the Raptors tanked out for. And I think if you look at the record, that the Raptors tried to tank in 2013, 2014 under Masai Ujiri, it was 6-12. If you try to look at the record that they tanked or they pulled the plug on in Tampa, it really wasn't that far away in terms of win percentage from where the Raptors are right now. Okay. The only time that I can think of where they should have tanked, could have tanked, didn't tank was the year that Wemby was on the line, and that was largely due to Fred's contract and Pascal Siakam's upcoming contract. That was the only reason, and that's why it annoyed me to no end. So the Raptors are clear. They know what they're doing. I think they know what they're doing. I hope you know what they're doing. And as long as we're all on the same page about what the Toronto Raptors are doing, then all I can say is good. I would hate to think that the Raptors were going to take door number 3, the video that I presented, door number 1, 2, 3. Well, you're not necessarily doing what the Orlando Magic did, right? You're not really doing what the Orlando Magic did, and you certainly don't want to do what you did in 2023. So the best thing you can do is what the Orlando Magic did in 2021, which is they bottomed out for Paolo. And I have no problem with it. I told you all in the beginning of the season, I have no problem whichever way this goes. And if you tell me Emmanuel Quickly is going to come back, I'm going to win 10 straight. My only question is, I'm never going to root against the wins. My only question would be, who did you beat? Did you beat New York? Did you beat Miami at Miami? Did you beat Boston at home? Did you beat Houston at home? These are the games that I care about. Once I see that you can beat these teams, now I'm willing to invest a little bit more. Again, sustainably. The Raptors have beat 2 teams all year among their 7 wins. Their 7 wins that have a record currently above 500 and barely above 500. So I think that it's all worth noting that if you are a bottom seed or a playing team, you're going to face a team much, much better than Minnesota or Miami. So you have to be able to show that you can compete with those teams in order for the playoff reps to be worth it. They say playoff reps are worth a lot. Yes, playoff reps are worth something when you're competitive. Playoff reps for the Raptors against Philadelphia in Scottie's rookie season were worth it because in theory, you can compete with that team. You'd shown all year that you can compete with that team. And had Fred VanVleet not been injured and Scottie Barnes not been injured, you might have even beat that team for all I know. Nick Nurse might have just outcoached Doc Rivers that badly that year. But if you're not going to show that you're going to compete against the Bostons and the Clevelands, and that's the team, or those are the 2 teams that you can possibly draw a first round matchup against, then what good is getting into a 7-game series and getting whooped by 45 every single game for 4 years? For 4 games. There's no point. It's just embarrassing. It doesn't do anything for your brand. It's not positive. You want momentum. And I think that, again, as I said, past behavior, good predictor of future behavior. Masai Ujiri is the same guy who said play in for what? Now, he later walked that back because he had to remain consistent to justify, going for the play in with Fred. But believe me, deep down, Masai Ujiri is very much a play in for what type of guy. He doesn't care about this stuff. Anyways, okay. James saying, Colin Murray, or Malawach if we're top 5. If we're not top 5. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we'll see. We'll see where Kaman falls. Some people are saying he's not a lottery pick. Some people are saying he should go top 4. We'll see where he goes. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. This is a very, very late live. It's 4:16 in the morning. I hope this wasn't laggy, but if it was, trust me, I'm going to try to figure it out tomorrow. It might be a browser issue. I've been using Chrome. I just tried to use Firefox and it was worse. Like the camera looked worse, everything looked worse. I couldn't work the tabs. So maybe I got to go to Safari. Maybe I need an exorcist. I don't know. All right. Talk to y'all later. Have a great one. Please hit like and subscribe on your way out. Appreciate y'all as always. And go follow Pinsar Basketball on X. We do a lot of stuff on X. Go follow us on Instagram. It's totally new content. Everywhere we do it, we don't do that thing that social media people do where they post the same content on 3 different things. We rarely ever do that. It's new content on everything. We do cross-populate a little bit, but for the most part, it's just, yeah, more Pinsar Basketball in your life. What's wrong with that? Talk to y'all later. Bye.